What's up, guys? It's Damp. I'm going to walk you today through the Grave Robber. Um, the Grave Robber is probably my favorite character in the game. The Houndmaster's up there too. I don't know. Both of them I really, really like a lot. But we're going to talk about the Grave Robber today. And I'll get you guys a little bit of insight on how to play it. So, the cool thing about the Grave Robber, before we get into her, is that she's got a ton of utility. A ton of utility. So there's no right way to play her. I'll start it off with that. I'm going to give you my play style, but she's one of those where there isn't a lot of wrong answers with her. So we'll kind of start overall at her pros and cons. So pros, her dodge is great. Her speed's pretty solid. She has scouting ability. She's great at disarming traps, so she can truly mitigate a ton of stress in the party for you because of her high crit, high dodge, high trap disarms. So she is probably going to come out of almost every dungeon without any stress. She shouldn't have a ton of it. She's not going to get hit. If she does get hit, she can disarm the traps to reduce some of that stress. So those are her pros. Her cons, she really doesn't have a lot of them. Doesn't have a ton of HP, so she can end up on death's door pretty quickly. And that's about it. I mean, her camping skills are great. Really, she doesn't have a ton of cons. I would say she is somebody you can pair with almost everybody. You know, I usually walk you guys through what's a great party for her. The particular hero class, you can really pair her with anyone. So she really doesn't have a lot of cons. Got a ton of pros. I do expect her to get nerfed with the DLC, but I will say this is the artist, Chris, that's his favorite class, so maybe it'll get passed over. So moving on. Let's look at the camping skills. So looking at the camping skills, what I have selected here are the 4 that I recommend. It's very easy to replace Thrown Dagger with Poison Darts. Advantage of the Poison Darts here would be that you can hit all 4 rows with it. So that's kind of a big deal. Whereas the Thrown Dagger cannot hit the front row. So Poison Darts may have a little bit of an advantage, but if you're in a Mark party, she does tend to shine. Because she's going to do more damage versus the marked targets, obviously. So these are the 4 that I recommend. Pick to the face. That's because with the utilizing the lunge, which is a high crit ability, which can do a lot of damage and give you a lot of stress heals. If you pop a lunge, you sometimes can end up really in that front row, which limits you to be able to use Thrown Dagger. You can do Shadow Fade, but if something's about to be killed, you really want to be able to just finish off and eliminate that enemy turn. And Poison Darts you can't throw unless you're in row 3. So Toxin Trickery's there. You could buff yourself and hope that you don't get hit and you get that speed buff. But I don't recommend Toxin Trickery because you should be running with a healer. If you're not running with a healer, it's an option for you. But I never recommend to run without a healer because if you don't play safe, the game will punish you. That's the best way to put it. So I'm recommending Pick to the Face for that reason. Lunge because it's really high crit. You can get a lot of stress heal with this. And you can do a ton of damage. It's got a great accuracy base. Running from the 3rd slot, it's a really good move to be able to hit that 3rd row stress or damage dealer from the 3rd row and be able to finish them off in one hit if you get that crit. I'm not recommending Flashing Daggers. It has its place. It is situational though because it's AoE. In running Shadow Fade, this is what you're going to use after you pop Lunge to get back into a better position to attack offensively again while giving yourself a buff. That's really strong. And then I recommend Thrown Dagger if you're going to run a Mark party. If you're not, you can run Poison Darts, but keep in mind with Poison Darts, you do have to stay in row 3. So if you're in row 2, let's say you've utilized your Lunge and you're in the 1st row. You're going to Shadow Fade. So if you're in the 2nd row, you have to have Pick to the Face because that's the only thing, if you're not running Thrown Dagger, that would allow you to do damage at that point. So you do want to run Pick to the Face. So those are the camping skills, or I should say combat skills, excuse me. Running through those are the 4 that I would recommend if you're going to run her in slot 3 without a mark party. With a mark party, you're going to run Thrown Dagger. Accuracy base is a little bit better in Poison Dart, so that's why I'd recommend it above this, but I'm typically running her with a mark party, so that's why I showed you that from the beginning. So looking at the camping skills, she has some of the best camping skills in the game when you look at these two. Snuff Box, which removes diseases from targets for free, which can be very expensive, so that's kind of a gold sink. And then Gallows Humor, which is, in my opinion, probably top 5 as far as the camping skills go. So I always recommend that you run Encourage, because the utility of the negative stress can save you some gold when you get back to town, obviously. And then I would recommend Night Moves over Pilfer. Pilfer's not very useful right now. And Pep Talk and Wound Care aren't useful unless you're running without a healer, which you'd take Wound Care. But Night Moves is good for scouting. So in really talking about where she excels and how she manages your stress down, you really want to look at the fact that she is extremely beneficial when it comes to scout checks. So if you get a critical scout check with her, you're going to bring home probably 7,500 more gold, because you're going to get that secret room. Also, what scout checks do is it allows you to manage and minimize some of the damage you're going to take. You can avoid fights. There's no reason to get into fights if you don't have to. And that the scouting ability also allows, I mean, it's basically worthless on a boss run, because for the most part on a boss run, you know where you're going. So her value on a boss run goes down significantly unless you're going to use her for a specific fight as a dodge tank, or as somebody who really is going to run high crit, or maybe use her for her blight for whatever reason. But I usually don't use scouts very much in the Darkest Dungeon. You can see I did use her in the Darkest Dungeon here, but that was kind of a mistake, actually. Scouting doesn't benefit you nearly as much in the Darkest Dungeon or on boss fights, because you know where you're going. You just got to get there. Now, in the Darkest Dungeon, no spoilers, not going to give it to you, but scouting just isn't as much of a factor. So in the regular dungeon runs that you're going to do to get trinkets, to get money, she's extremely beneficial and is pretty much OP. She's probably in the top 3 when you talk about versatility and her ability to shine in some of the regular dungeons. As far as the quirks you want to use, you can see what I locked in so far. Deadly's amazing with her. Eagle Eye's great, and that's when you're looking at really Thrown Dagger. It is really good. Probably Precise Striker would be a better fit with Pick to the Face and Lunge, but you also have Thrown Dagger. Poison Darts, not as much. Crit isn't as much of a factor, but Thrown Dagger with that really high crit, pairing that up with Eagle Eye is really good. So those are the quirks you want to consider. Things you want to get rid of right away. Really, she doesn't have a ton of them. Scattering's not good for sure, so I probably will get rid of this, but anything that reduces accuracy, reduces or increases the amount of stress you take, you usually typically want to get rid of. But I would say Eagle Eye, Precise Striker, Deadly, Evasive is good. All those are good. But if you look at the abilities you're going to use the most and hope for crit, Precise Striker is probably the top 1. Evasive's probably 2nd. Deadly's pretty strong. Eagle Eye's probably 4th or 5th. As far as trinkets, so I was reading on Reddit this week that somebody said that this was not a good trinket, and I would highly, highly, highly disagree. Although they did, when they gave their opinion, they said that it gives you additional stress, which I didn't understand. But anyway, maybe he just was mistaken with what he was referring to. But this is one of the best trinkets in the game, in my opinion. You do have to obviously eat a little more food, but you guys know the amount of food I take, and it's typically not a factor. So I do think Raider's Talisman is a must-take almost on every run because of the additional scouting chance. Traps just are a non-factor. The speed's great and the crit's great. I do expect this to get nerfed. Feather Crystal is because of the utility ability that it has. Speed and dodge are always great. They're probably the 2 strongest stats in the game. And I mean, you could obviously replace that. You could replace this. A few of the things I would consider, surgical gloves would work well with these 2 abilities if you're going to focus on those. There's a bunch of other ones you could consider, but anything that improves crit, improves speed, improves dodge. Common Crystal's a great one. The Fasting Seal would be great, would really benefit her. Looking at the diseases and what you want to consider, you could consider the fits, but it's not really that valuable. Rabies, she doesn't do a ton of damage to begin with, so I wouldn't consider taking rabies. I would just wipe the diseases when you get them. So overall, that's kind of an overview on what you want to do with the Grave Robber. One of the strongest classes in the game for sure. I do expect her to get a generic nerf. I don't know how they'll do it, but I do expect her trinket to be nerfed. I expect her to be nerfed overall, but she's still going to be good. The scouting truly is where she shines. By her being able to scout and tell you what's going to be ahead of you, especially in those explore 90% of dungeons, she really, really outclasses a lot of other heroes. So that's where I would use her. I would pick the 90% of dungeons, explore 90% of the dungeon, bring her with that trinket or some sort of scouting trinket, maybe a survival guide if you don't have anything else, and run her through that dungeon, and you'll be surprised at the amount of fights you can avoid, the amount of additional curios you can interact with if you want to or you don't want to, and it will allow you to go through there and really limit your stress because she allows you to pick and choose where your battles are. You're very unlikely to get surprised with her. So she puts you in a good position to manage the stress, which in turn will help you manage a lot of your money. So that's it with the Grave Robber, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.